So if you're looking for a more simple option for completing a long tail cast on without having to estimate the amount of yarn that you're going to need for that cast on, go ahead and keep watching this video. I'm going to be sharing 2 simple methods with you today. So both of these cast on methods that I'm going to be showing you today can be done on straight needles, double pointed needles, or circular needles. Whatever you're going to be using for your project will work just fine for both of these cast on methods. The only thing that you're going to want to check is you're just going to need to make sure that you're using the right size needle for the right size yarn. I know some people really don't swatch projects before they begin. I'm an avid swatcher just because sometimes I knit really tight, sometimes I knit a little bit looser. Really just depends on the type of knitting needles that I'm using, or if I'm doing just a standard continental knitting or Portuguese knitting, my tension and gauge will change a little bit. So I personally swatch all of my projects before I begin. But if you are not somebody that does that, you'll just want to make sure that you follow the recommended needle size that typically comes with a cake of yarn or a skein of yarn that you purchase at a yarn shop. But again, any style of needle that you're going to be using will work just fine for both of these methods. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead, flip the camera around so you guys can see my hands, see what I'm doing with the ball of yarn and my needles just to get a better up close view. So for this long tail cast on method, you're only going to be needing 1 ball of yarn. Now this will also work if you have 2 balls of yarn that are the same color. You can use the outside or the inside of both balls of yarn. It really is up to you. But today I'm just going to show you if you have 1 ball and you're doing a project and you want to cast on. So start by getting some yarn from the inside as well as from the outside of your ball of yarn. Take both of those ends, put them together, and you're just going to tie your simple slip knot, leaving a little tail to weave in when your project's finished. Go ahead and grab your knitting needle, put that through, and tighten up your slip knot onto your needle. So the thing to remember with this cast on method is you are not going to count your slip knot as a stitch. Alright, so now that we have our yarn attached to our needles via our slip knot, slide that down and we're going to go ahead and cast on our stitches. Now, when you're casting on your stitches, you're going to make sure that you do not count the slip knot as a stitch. So we're going to cast on 10. So this is going to be stitch number 1. Now we have 10 stitches on our needle, and now we need to make a decision. Do you want your yarn to pull from the center of your ball of yarn or from the outside of your ball of yarn? Now for me personally, I like my yarn coming from the center. I feel like it keeps my yarn stationary in my yarn bowls, so if I have 3 or 4 colors that I'm working with, my yarn is not like rolling around in my knitting bag or in my basket or my yarn bowl. So I prefer to pull from the center of the ball of yarn. I know my sister is also a knitter and she prefers the outside of her ball of yarn. So either one of these is going to work. You're just going to want to make a decision. So again, I'm using the center pull. So I'm going to find which piece of yarn goes to the center of my ball of yarn, which is this one. So this is the piece I'm going to want to keep. So I'm going to take the other piece of yarn, again leaving a tail 5 or 6 inches to weave in at the end, and you're going to give that a cut. Now that I have my yarn attached to the center of my ball of yarn only, you can wind up the rest of that yarn and tuck in that tail to keep it nice and tidy. Now we can grab our other needle and we can knit. Make sure you do not knit the slip knot at the end. I'm going to show you what to do when we get there. And there's 10. So we've just knit up our 10 stitches onto this needle, and now all we have left is our slip knot over here. So you're going to go ahead and just remove that needle from that slip knot, give that knot a pull, and snug that up, and there you go. Now after we've finished in our projects, all we have to do is weave in these yarn ends and we are finished. Now you can go ahead and just continue knitting your project. All right, so here's another trick for casting on stitches without having to estimate yarn usage. Now this one takes a little bit longer than the previous method that I showed you, but I just want to have a couple of options here for you. Both are easy. This one is just a little bit more time consuming. So you're going to start with your end of your yarn, either from your center or the outside, whatever you prefer to use while you're knitting. And you're going to take that end of yarn, again leaving 5 or 6 inches of a tail to weave in. Starting at that 5 or 6 inch mark, you're going to take your working yarn, or the yarn that's attached to your ball of yarn, and you're just going to wrap that around your knitting needle however many stitches you're going to need to cast on. So say I'm doing 15 stitches. Take that yarn, wrap it 15 times. 2, 3, 4. So there's 15 wraps around my knitting needle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So from that point, you can just kind of pinch your yarn and go ahead and tie your slip knot there. Insert your needle through your slip knot. Give it a pull so it's nice and tight up against your needle. And now you can do your long tail cast on. So let's cast on our 15 stitches. There's 2, 3, 4. So now we've just finished casting on 15 stitches, and here is the remainder piece of yarn that we can either cut a little bit shorter or just leave hanging and weave in at the end. Now you're ready to start knitting. So that's it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed these 2 simple methods for doing a long tail cast on without having to estimate your yarn usage. Let me know in the comments section down below which method you tried and which method you'd prefer if you'd actually used these before. And I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next time.